Thousands of demonstrators marched through central London on Saturday for a rally called by British far-right activist Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, better known as Tommy Robinson. According to Associated Press, aerial footage of the rally from Sky News showed large crowds in the Waterloo area of the British capital and a large police presence. Some members of the crowd were seen carrying English and British flags. Prominent far-right figures, including US President Donald Trump's former strategist Steve Bannon, are due to speak at the event. In the past, Yaxley-Lennon has been jailed for assault, mortgage fraud and contempt of court. He founded the nationalist street protest group English Defence League in 2009. Even after the group faded from view around 2013, he remained one of the most influential far-right figures in Britain and can still draw large crowds to the streets.
Russian federal TV channels have refused to give a detailed account of why mass protests and bloody riots broke out in Nepal. The main reason is the blocking of 26 social networks by the country's authorities, including Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, X, and LinkedIn, writes Agents to Foe. The local youth immediately revolted and overthrew the government, a nightmare for the Putin regime. The fact is that in recent years, no fewer restrictions have been introduced in Russia, but Russians tolerate it. A vivid example of the overthrow of a dictatorship with a video of a triumphant crowd causes concern in the Kremlin, so the coverage of the protests on Kremlin channels was appropriate. Russian TV either kept silent about this detail or passed it over in passing. Instead, the version about intervention by external forces was routinely aired. Russia 1 did not say a word about blocking social networks. Channel 1 mentioned the ban only in passing, emphasizing the external coincidence of the protests with Nepal's intention to join the SCO. NTV, although it named the blocking of foreign platforms as the reason for the protests, did not list which social networks were banned. Experts emphasize that the reality was different. Nepal's youth took to the streets precisely because the authorities banned their usual channels of communication and information. The protests turned into mass riots. Dozens of people died. The parliament, the Supreme Court, and the houses of officials were burned. Under pressure from the streets, the government lifted the ban, and the country's prime minister resigned. For the Kremlin and Russian propagandists, this is a scary scenario. In Russia, Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn are also banned. YouTube is restricted and WhatsApp calls are blocked. But there were no protests in the country, which is why federal channels are trying to shift attention to external interference, just so that Russians do not draw parallels and think that the government is afraid. People are capable of overthrowing the government if it deprives them of basic freedoms. For many, the scenes in Kathmandu were reminiscent of the turmoil that gripped Bangladesh last year and Sri Lanka in 2022. The unrest began Monday as a self-styled Gen Z protest against corruption, nepotism, and restrictions on social media. It quickly escalated after security forces opened fire on the crowds. Then protesters had stormed and torched Parliament, the Supreme Court, and multiple government offices, including Singadurbar, the Central Administrative Complex. Homes of political leaders were attacked, police stations overrun, and Tribhuvan International Airport briefly closed. In addition, media outlets and schools were set on fire, while the Ministry of Health and Population was also destroyed, including the National Health Emergency Operations Center. The army assumed control of nationwide security late Tuesday, local time, deploying troops across the Kathmandu Valley and imposing movement restrictions to stabilize the situation. Checkpoints were established and people have been urged to stay home except for essential travel. Media also reported the army recovering some of the weapons looted from police personnel, while youth groups helped apprehend escaped prisoners and return firearms. Some inmates voluntarily surrendered.